in!
We're ready, okay. Welcome to the very first episode of the Vampire Bookclub, the podcast where we read books about scary things and then laugh about them.
Very creepy.
Very creepy. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jamie.
And today we are discussing The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. We were initially going to do Twilight as our first episode, but we just didn't, and now 8 months later here we are ready to record
exactly
with a different book which we have done significantly less prep for, so we're just gonna see how it goes. Okay, so The Castle of Otranto. Jamie, what was your perception of The Castle of Otranto before you read it, or even as you were reading it?
Well, I know that it was supposed to be, like the progenitor of the Gothic genre. Aside from that, I knew absolutely nothing about it. I think I've seen clips. I've heard about it, and that was basically it. So I came into it pretty blind.
When did you read it first?
I read it first when I was about 15, I think, and had the same reaction as many of the reviewers we're going to come to in a second, in that I had absolutely no clue what was going on. But now, as a big human of 24, I think we've plotted the family tree pretty well.
It is an absolute mess, which I think is interesting considering its kind of enduring popularity. It was first published in 1764 for the first time, and then republished with a different preface where he owned up to writing it.
Yeah, it was not.
After he realised that people liked it.
It was not William Marshall.
Basically.
It was actually Horace Walpole.
It was him all along.
Exactly.
Yes. And yeah, I can't remember when I think I read it for the first time quite recently. I think it was maybe last year or the year before, while I was trying to
Why did you read it?
Just to get some books that I should have read off my list. And I tried to read Anne Radcliffe's Mysteries of Udolpho, and that was just long. And then I found this one and I was like, oh, this is significantly shorter. I'm sure I can power through this.
It was short.
It's a very different book to the Mysteries of Udolpho. And yeah, I think it's hilarious.
I read it all in one sitting. In the bath, and every time the bath would get cold, I would just let some of the cold water out and then put some hot water in. And it was quite the experience.
I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook this time round because I haven't got time to read. And the narrator was very theatrical, which I thoroughly enjoyed. He really brought it to life.
Good, because it is wild.
It is wild. Let's read some of the reviews, see what other people are thinking about Otranto.
So I have 3 reviews here from just Google. I believe they've been pulled from Goodreads or something like that. Jacob O'Grady a year ago says, "Yo, I preferred Hotel Transylvania, to be honest." And 2 people found this helpful.
2 people.
So
is Hotel Transylvania the Disney movie?
The Disney. I think it's definitely a movie. It's like an animated movie. I've not seen it myself, but
it's got Adam Sandler voicing Dracula, doesn't it?
Move over, Nosferatu.
Bela Lugosi, your heart out.
Yeah. The second one is from Bailey Ennie a year ago, which was, "The book was old and doo-doo. Big disappointment." And 1 person found this helpful. So
the book was old and doo-doo.
The reviews are coming in, Horace, and the contemporary crowd are not loving it.
And yeah, it's still enduring.
Exactly.
In popular culture, which, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about it.
And then, finally, DT Photography, 4 months ago, so fairly recently, said, gave it 2 stars. I don't know if I mentioned it, I can't remember, but the other 2 reviewers gave it a 1. But DT Photography says, "I love Gothic literature, but this is like a bad soap opera. It started interesting, so I thought, and quickly turned convoluted plot, crazy characters, just plain ridiculous. And is that not the, like you've said, enduring attraction of it that it is wild.
It is fucking wild, and I think that's part of the convention of Gothic, is that it's just this. It seemed to have garnered this reputation of being like really lofty and kind of, important, and it is in a lot of ways, but it is also fucking ridiculous in so many others.
Exactly, it is extremely ridiculous, and like you said, like Horace was pretty self-conscious about its sort of, I suppose, cheesiness. That when it did get a pretty good reception, he claimed it, and he was like, "This is mine. This is not."
It was me.
This is not. Oh God, I'm not going to even. Oh no, I am going to attempt it. Onufrio Morauto, his Italian alter ego.
Translated by William Marshall.
Exactly.
A gentleman. A gentleman translator.
These two people were responsible for this, and they're dead because this was written in the 1500s, said Horace.
And it was found in there's this whole backstory. It was like, it's found in an attic in this old family house that, was Catholic, and they hid it away, and I've discovered it, and now I'm going to tell you the story. And it's all a lie.
The layout of the castle is just too specific for this to be completely rooted in fiction. So maybe the Castle of Otranto did exist somewhere. And then he comes out and he's like, yep, I made it up, and it was great, wasn't it? Well, not that it was great.
Love it.
Not that it was great. It was just like, this is the ideas that I had behind it, and how I wanted it to be received, and how it was received.
Which I think is interesting, and we will discuss the two separate prefaces in a bit. But before we get on to that, let's try and detangle to some degree the plot and the family tree. So, okay, start with a little summary. Basically, it all starts...
It all kicks off.
It all kicks off in Otranto when Conrad, the prince who is in line for the Otranto... Principality, the throne of Otranto. We're never actually told, like, how important Otranto is to anywhere else. It's all very insular. He is crushed by a giant helmet. Is it on the day of his wedding, or
it is on the day of his wedding?
It's very poetic. He's crushed by a massive helmet, and dies, and
quite horribly.
And this kicks off a lot of shit, because Manfred, his dad, who is the current ruler of Otranto, is like, holy shit, there's this fucking prophecy that says that the bloodline is going to end, and we're not going to be in charge of Otranto anymore, and this is the beginning of it. Holy fuck. And that is the start. What then happens is a concatenation of shit, basically. Manfred decides to imprison a young peasant named Theodore under the helmet.
Because he got a bit smart.
He got a bit smart and pointed out, interestingly, that the helmet looks distinctly like that of the massive statue of Alfonso, who... Is he the founder of Otranto, or is he's just a big deal in Otranto?
He's a massive deal. Quite literally, as you'll come to find out.
He's
a massive deal.
And so Manfred decides to imprison him for his impertinence under the helmet, and decides that he is going to divorce his barren wife Hippolyta, and instead marry Conrad's bride-to-be Isabella, so that she can bear him a son, and that this prophecy isn't going to come to pass. So when he tells Isabella this, she runs away.
She does.
And she goes to the dungeons of the castle and is looking for a way to escape, and then Theodore's there somehow. We never find out how he got out from under the helmet.
Oh, I think it was that he fell through the floor. I think the helmet is so heavy. I think the helmet is so heavy that it like broke up the stone above, and he basically just like slipped through. It's true.
Okay. So he slipped through the stone, landed in this cellar, this dark passageway, and he helps Matilda. He helps Isabella to escape. And then Manfred comes in and he's really annoyed. And he's like,
kind of weird in that scene. He just opens the door and then just is sort of like waiting in the shadows. Like he's just fallen through he's imprisoned beneath a helmet, then fallen through the floor and is just sort of like skulking in the dark. Like he's not like, help me. Because as far as we know at this point, he's just some peasant boy. We don't know that he's, spoilers.
There's spoilers that we will come to. Manfred dislikes the attitude that he gets because he's like, where's Isabella? And Theodore's like, I don't know. And Manfred's like, you must know. And so has him imprisoned again. Does he? Yeah, he has him imprisoned again. He's imprisoned like 4 times in this. It's really hard to keep track. So Theodore's imprisoned again. Then 2 of Manfred's servants run in, Diego and Jacques, and say that the castle is being haunted and they've seen a massive foot ghost in the Great Hall or somewhere.
A giant foot that's haunting the castle. And Manfred's like, this is silly.
And then what happens? What happens after that bit? Then we get... so Father Jerome comes along. Because Manfred's like, I need to find Isabella. Oh no, that's a bit. Yeah, Isabella runs to the church.
Yes,
where Father Jerome is. Father Jerome then comes to Manfred to sort the shit out.
Yeah, he's like, you are not marrying this girl. Absolutely not. No divorce.
It's a sin against God, blah, 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 all of that. And Manfred's like,
shut the
off.
hell up.
I'm gonna do what I want. And says that Father Jerome has to bring Isabella to him. And then Father Jerome's like, no. And then somehow, because that's the bit where Theodore's suddenly there again. And I can't remember how he got there, where we are in the castle. It's all very vague.
Theodore, well, he gets himself into Manfred's good graces for a hot second.
Oh yeah, because he says he's going to go and see the ghost.
How he does it, and then he's going to go see the ghost with him. And then I think Manfred immediately it turns on him and imprisons him again.
But he doesn't get taken away, and that's when Father Jerome comes in. And then Theodore's being annoying again. Manfred finds him annoying, and so he's like, I'm going to kill you. And then Theodore takes off his shirt, and there's a birthmark, or it's a mark shaped like an arrow or something.
And Jerome loses his mind. He's like, this is my son!
My long-lost son!
My son!
And it turns out that Father Jerome was secretly a rich guy.
An earl.
An earl before he
He pledged himself to GG.
The big G. And that he had a son who has been long lost, and this is Theodore, and he pleads with Manfred to let him go, and Manfred says, I will let him go if you bring me Isabella and Father
side note
Jerome.
as well, by this point, also Manfred is also doubly hating Theodore because people keep saying, oh, but doesn't he look like Alfonso? And Manfred's like, he doesn't look like Alfonso. Stop saying he looks like Alfonso, because he doesn't. So, but
he does.
Yeah,
we know he does. He looks like
this
guy, and we'll get to Alfonso in a second. But this is a big problem for Manfred for prophecy reasons. So, anyway, at this point, Father Jerome agrees to bring Isabella in exchange for his son's life. And then a knight with a massive sword turns up, who doesn't take off his helmet, so we don't know who he is, and he doesn't say anything. It's all a bit weird.
They go for, like, Manfred... Well,
but he basically threatens to... One of his servants says, oh, I'm here with this guy, and on behalf of this guy, Friedrich, who is Isabel's father, and he wants her back, and you can't marry her off, soz. And so this knight is just there, and Manfred's like, holy shit, now I've got to deal with this. So he takes him off to a banquet, and Father Jerome goes off to find Isabella. But Father Jerome, Isabella by this point has gone. She's left the church, because somehow she's found out. Oh yeah, one of the friars tells her that Father Jerome's made this deal, and she's like, I'm gonna go. And then Father Jerome's like, oh shit, now I'm gonna have to go and tell Manfred that, like, I've lost his daughter, but also, like, please don't kill my son.
Actually, not his daughter, I've lost Isabella.
Yeah, so he goes back to the castle. In the meantime, Manfred is trying to entertain this silent knight who won't take his armour off.
And won't have any food or enjoy himself at all.
And he's just sat there silently, and Manfred's like, this is awkward, I'm trying to entertain you here. It doesn't work.
And also this guy's just threatened him at the door and been like, I'm taking the Principality of Otranto. And Manfred's like, no, you're fucking not. You're absolutely not. But you know what?
Come to dinner.
You know, I will show you that good Gothic hospitality and sit you at my table and we will feast. And Frederick is like...
And he's trying really hard.
Yeah, it's like, sat there like, I'm going to duel you or your champion at some point. So let's just get this over with.
Yes. So at this point, we discover that he is Friedrich. I think he takes off his helmet or something, and he's like, I wasn't dead all along, because supposedly then we find out that he wasn't killed in the Holy Wars like we all thought. He's actually alive, and he's here to get his daughter back. And then Father Jerome runs in and is like, Isabella's gone, we've lost her. And he's like, what the fuck have you been doing with my daughter? And Manfred's like, womp womp.
Yeah.
Sorry. And so Frederick runs off to go and find Isabella. Then where does it go then? It goes to... Bianca has a weird conversation with Theodore, which is not relevant. Theodore... Oh no, Matilda. Is it Matilda? Is this the Matilda bit? Matilda lets Theodore out of prison.
Yes.
He's been imprisoned again. She gives him some armour. They have a romantic moment where they both realise they're head over heels in love for each other, even though they've only just met. She lets him out, and he goes off into the woods where he discovers Isabella hiding in a cave. And
it's like, I will not let anyone through the mouth of this cave. I will die protecting you.
Even though there's like, really no reason why you should be doing this.
Well, Isabella's like, well, that's great. Thank you. Like, that's great. And then a knight approaches the mouth of the tunnel, and there's no communication whatsoever as to who anyone is. Like, it's just pure testosterone-fueled dueling. Like, it's just like, you are not coming in here and seeing Isabella. And then the knight is like, yes, I am. And then, you know, there's a short exchange in which swords are involved, and the knight is maimed. It's implied to be bad.
Yeah, it's weird because he's on his deathbed, and then they find, well, not on his deathbed, he's like dying, and they're like holding him, and he's like, oh no, oh, where's Isabella, my daughter? And they're like, oh my god, you're...
And the thing was like...
And they're like, oh shit, we just killed your father.
Yeah.
Soz. And then they take him back to the castle, and he's fine. They put him in bed.
Yeah.
And
they give him he just has a lay down. Yeah. He's implied to be like, you know, on death's door.
Yeah.
Like laying in the field.
Live, and they're like, really shit, moment.
Somebody read him his last rites. Like, oh my god. And then he just has a lay down, and he's ready to
he's fine. He's fine. He gets the hots on for Matilda, who is Manfred's daughter, Conrad's brother. Oh my god, we'll go through the fucking family tree in a minute, but so they're all crowded round his deathbed, not deathbed.
Sick bed.
And they're all there, and Manfred seems to have forgotten that he's imprisoned Theodore. He's just left to roam. Well, no, because what happened? Frederick tells his story, and then Manfred comes in and he's like, oh my god, it's the ghost of Alfonso, because he's in this weird, like, old armour.
Yep.
And it's Theodore, and then they're like, it's
how
Theodore,
the hell did
bro.
you get out? And then he's like, because he doesn't want to throw Matilda under the bus, he's like, my dad let me out.
And Father Jerome's like,
yeah,
fuck you. Yeah, I let him out. I totally let him out.
I totally did that. Yep.
And then they all just depart ways. Very randomly, and in the meantime, Frederick sees Matilda. He gets the hots for Matilda. He wants to marry Matilda. Manfred says, if you let me marry your daughter Isabella, you can marry Matilda. And Frederick's like, okay,
Frederick's like at this point implied to be sort of like addled by blood loss as well, and he's like, you know, he's on his stab bed, like we said, he's fine, but he's also like affected by the injuries. He's just like, he's not gonna die, like, he's definitely not gonna die, but he's ill, like he's infirm. And Manfred's like, great, I can use this to my advantage. I can join our two families together so that my claim to Otranto will be the only legitimate one.
Yeah. And so they all go away, kind of, the women are kind of a bit put out that they're having to marry these men, these gross old men, and they have a weird conversation about it because Isabella saw that Theodore looked at Matilda.
Oh, is this the one where they have, like...
looked back, and Isabella's like, but I find him hot, and it's all, they have this
they're like
weird,
abruptly...
awkward conversation.
That conversation they have as well, where Isabella's like, why would I like Theodore? He nearly killed my dad. Like, why would I like him? Like, do you like him, though? Do you like him, though?
Please tell me you don't like him.
Yeah, do you like him? He nearly killed my dad. You shouldn't like him because he nearly killed my dad. Just so you know. And then they basically, I don't even remember how this conversation is, like, reconciled to itself, but after that, they're like, I'm sorry. We were sisters. We've known each other for so long. You have him, Matilda. You have Theodore.
And then Hippolyta comes in and is like, no, you have to marry these gross old men.
Hippolyta at this point as well, like, Father Jerome has been like, you don't get divorced. And she's like, I will do anything
that Manfred says.
I will do anything that he says. So if... And then he's like, no, don't get divorced. She even gets told, like, you know, his actual desire is to, like, you know, just, like, sack you off to a nunnery and, like, marry Isabella and, like, have a son. But she's not, like, fine with it. She's just resigned to the fact that I guess this is gonna happen, you know, like, fine, then, I guess.
Yeah, so that's the end of the women. That's basically as much as we ever hear from them. And then what happens? Then it all gets very complicated. So there are a few banquets, there are a few ghosts, but basically what we find out is that Frederick was given this massive sword by a hermit in the woods who was on his
deathbed.
And he was given these instructions to give this knight the massive sword by St. Nicholas. It's all very, like, you know, religious and, you know, holy in this whole destiny. And everyone is kind of just mooching around, kind of seeing ghosts. Things are happening in the castle. And then the next big thing that happens is Matilda goes to meet Theodore in the church for some loving. And Manfred follows them thinking that it's his daughter Isabella. No, sorry, not his daughter Isabella.
Isabella, who wishes to wed.
Matilda's his daughter. Matilda goes to the church to meet Theodore. He thinks it's Isabella and goes to kill her for having this tryst behind his back. And he kills her, but it turns out that it was Matilda, and so he's just killed his own daughter, and he's racked with grief.
Yeah, he wants to kill himself, but then Theodore, like, jumps on him.
Yeah, and there's this whole dramatic sequence of, you know, all these terrible things happening, and then basically the story is resolved when Isabella agrees to Theodore is somehow, and we've tried to work it out, we don't really know how, but he's suddenly found to be the rightful heir of Otranto. Isabella decides to marry him, and Manfred goes off with Hippolyta to lead a Christian life of solitude. And that's basically the story, and if you didn't follow that, neither did we.
Precisely. I have, though, we're going to move on to the family tree.
Let's go through the family tree.
I have, though, sat here and on a sheet of paper plotted the family tree mostly so that we can speak about it with any sort of confidence. So
just to remind
we
us,
have
we're mixing names.
We've mentioned Alfonso the Good, the rightful owner of Otranto, the
long dead but still very much
deal.
The massive deal.
Oh, we also excluded the fact, you know, where, like, the castle basically falls apart, and then there's, like, Alfonso is, like, there. And
the sword falls at one point, and he's like, the statue's crying blood. It's all very gothic.
It's very, very gothic. But yeah, I think Alfonso specifically says that, like, Theodore is. Oh, hold on. No. Wait, 1 second. We've got the book here, so we're just flicking through it.
What bit are you looking for?
I'm trying to look for the bit where the ghost of Alfonso appears. Like, the wall falls down in Otranto, and then he, like, says some shit.
He says some shit. He lays some hard truths.
He lays down something. Oh, no. No, I don't think I've, This is the stabbing. No, okay, well, the ghost of Alfonso turns up and speaks spits some shit.
But Alfonso is meant to be like the true ruler. He's like this legend guy. He's long dead, but everyone really respects him. And he's like the start of this whole mess of a family tree. So
he will say some stuff. When Charlie's talking later, maybe I'll flick through the book and find exactly what he said, so that I can talk about it with some confidence.
The fact, yes, we will find it.
But
Alfonso.
That was a So Alfonso, the big deal, the big cheese, the very massive cheese. He he went to fight in the Holy Land, in the Holy War, the Crusades. He was never thought to have sired a child. However, he did, with a woman called Victoria. But he didn't want it known that he was wedded when he was on the crusade, because he thought it was unchristian. So it wasn't great knowledge. It was kept very secret. He dies. I'm not going to say who murders him, but that's also important. He dies, and Victoria has a nameless gal. She's written down on my notes here. He has a daughter with Victoria.
Who has another... Does he have another... Does she have then a nameless gal? Or is there only one nameless
There's only
gal?
one nameless gal.
It doesn't matter.
One nameless gal.
Somewhere down the line.
One nameless
Father
gal.
Jerome sleeps with a nameless gal. Who is
Alfonso's
the direct
daughter.
Descendant of Alfonso.
Father Jerome, when he was in his slutty Earl days...
Slutty Earl. Slutty Earl Jerome.
Yeah, had sex with the nameless gal, wedded her, all the rest of it, and they had Theodore, which is why Theodore looks so much like Alfonso, because Alfonso is his granddaddy. But, like I said, Alfonso died in the Holy Land. Who killed him, you ask? Only Manfred's grandfather, Ricardo. So maybe there is another nameless gal somewhere in here.
Is there another nameless gal? It doesn't matter.
No, it's not important.
Yeah, they're not people.
No, exactly.
They're just wombs.
They are. You're exactly right. They're just wombs. So, yeah. Ricardo kills Alfonso, which is Manfred's granddad, and creates a fictitious will of usurpation. I do hope that's a word. And takes the Principality of Otranto onto himself and his family. Obviously, Hippolyta and Manfred. Hippolyta. My God. I was thinking about it too. I
was just thinking about sausages.
Before this, I was like, I need to stop calling her Hippolyta like the sausage. And I do hope I don't do it in the podcast. First time saying her name, do it. Hippolyta and Manfred, obviously an item. They have Matilda and Conrad, who at the beginning of the novel, Matilda's like, oh, my father, you're led to believe that Manfred loves Conrad and loathes Matilda. In reality, he just fucking hates both his children. When he's trying to... He talks
about Conrad like he's just a weakling.
Yeah, when he's trying to...
He's always sickly and I can rely on him.
Yeah, when he's trying to basically assault Isabella, he's like, you're not sorry for Conrad dying. And you know what? Neither am I.
He's like, he was a weakling who didn't deserve you.
Exactly. But me, I'm a real man. I'm a real man, and you are a real woman. You can make me a boy. Like you said, wombs. But she's resistant to her, to being a walking womb.
To an extent.
So yeah, to an extent.
She dies, so poor Matilda.
No, I'm saying Isabella was resistant to being a walking womb. She runs away from Manfred.
And then she marries Theodore, so that's all.
So I guess she does.
She's just kind of... Friedrich, we can't really work out how he's related to Alfonso, but they are related, and so he... Before Theodore...
Somehow blood relative of Alfonso.
Somehow blood relative. Before Theodore is proclaimed to be a direct descendant and they realise this, Friedrich and his family are meant to be...
Yeah, they've got the best claim.
Yeah, they have. So, but they've been usurped by Manfred's family. And that's kind of... Yeah, that's the family tree. We'll head back to it, no doubt, when we're...
And then you have sort of, like, other characters dotted around, like Bianca, the the scared maid, and then other scared servants, and then the hermit, who personally is my favourite character because he just exists to be a spooky bit, and who doesn't like a spooky bit?
But that's the big part. That's the big part that everyone needs to. Those are the big ones, and that's how everyone's kind of related. And it really took us a while to figure that out. It was not
easy.
Clear.
And a lot of it comes as just complete exposition at the end as well. It's like, oh, this is how everything. It's like, oh, and then it ends, and the novel's just done.
Like, okay, fine. which is what I was saying earlier about how it's kind of gothic in structure. Because it is so convoluted and difficult to follow. It's kind of like, I read something that was like, it's sort of all kind of, you know, a really good metaphor for the structure and for the kind of the plot line is kind of like the very gothic aesthetic of like winding corridors and like dungeons and stuff, because it's, you know, and who's behind the door, you don't know. It's all just a mess, but purposeful
mess.
There's a purposeful gothic mess.
Same.
Yeah, so and it's all, yeah, the thing about it is it depends. I don't know, maybe listeners, you've read it, maybe you haven't. If you have, you will either have a copy with quotation marks or you won't.
And if you have, you can correct us on some stuff.
Yes, because it was originally published without quotation marks because grammar wasn't standardised at this point. However, Walpole really just fucks around with that and doesn't make it clear at all who is speaking. And so you have these very kind of gothically structured sentences where it kind of all falls into one, and it's kind of like, it's very difficult to navigate. It's kind of a complicated read, and so I can see like why people are kind of put off by that. I think it's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, doo-doo, I think.
Yeah, and the use of deliberately archaic language, and it's all designed to be.
Don't you know it was written in the 1500s by
Euphoria, whatever his name is. But it's all designed to be incredibly gothic, and this is why, you know, it's the original gothic novel, and this is why it's established so many of those kind of tropes. And it was sort of the first one to do that, and it's frustrating because there are so many questions in the plot that are left without a resolution. Like, where the fuck do all the ghosts come from? How does the helmet land on Conrad?
How does it grow larger? Because it's implied that, like, this is ridiculously large. Like, I remember when I first when I first heard it described to me, and it was like it starts with a death caused by a helmet. I was expecting like some sort of like a meteorite, like, you know, like a helmet the size of a normal helmet-sized helmet, like somehow like flying out and like clocking poor Conrad round the head. But no, he's it was a massive helmet that lands on him. A comically
large helmet.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I read that, I was like, have I read this right? I had to go and like look up archaic uses for the word helmet, because I was like, maybe this means something else. Like, why would a helmet just fall out of the sky?
I did the shorter route, and I just typed in Castle of Otranto helmet on Google Images and found lots of lovely artist renditions of the scene of a massive helmet on poor Conrad.
Oh, poor Conrad. He gets a bad time in this story.
He does get a bad time, but thank God he doesn't have to be alive for a lot of it.
He just lived through all of that shit. And yes, because it's so complex and it's so bizarre, and because it is the first of its time, there are two. It was published the first time in, what was it? 1764. And then he republished it again. I can't remember how long later, but he republished it with a separate preface. And the preface is interesting because in the original preface he goes on talking about how, you know, he's this translator, William Marshall, and that, you know, he found this, you know, as I was saying before, found this old text. It was like withered away, and like he was translating this from you know, this thing that he found
in Italian,
Italian, and it had this weird
and the English language. It's very funny. He's like, the English language does not do this justice. Obviously, it was never written in Italian. But he's like, the English language does not do the intricacies
Which
of
is
this.
Such a cop out.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, if you find this shit, it's because it's meant to be in Italian.
Exactly, and you know, the Italian language just has the subtle lilts and flows to convey the Gothic style, but obviously it was never written in Italian.
It's only ever written in English.
It's written in English. So.
And then and then it was received well, and he republished it, and kind of completely threw the whole first preface into the whole point of it was kind of lost in a way, because he says that no, it was actually me, Horace Walpole, the guy in that spooky house down the road, and I wrote it, and I wanted it to be like Shakespeare, and I wanted to convey the subtleties of human emotion, which we will talk about because I don't know who he's running into, but he's got some very irrational friends.
Yeah, and some very I do not believe that every woman that he's met in his life behaved like the poor women he wrote about. Good Lord. But I also agree in that I also really like the fact that this preface is almost an extension of the Gothic narrative of encoded language and secrecy and sort of like duplicitousness, like fake stories surrounding stuff, or sort of like the mythos surrounding the creation of the Castle of Otranto is Gothic in itself. Hence why I prefer the first preface. I like the idea of it coming from, even if it's not true, it sort of somewhat reminds me of like the like the way that people create found footage, that sort of intrigue as to this could be exactly, this could be real, like this could be real. Like Horace, nobody's buying that this was written in the 1500s, and for like nobody is actually going to buy that, but it's interesting, and I think has as much Gothic worth as the story itself.
I think so. Yeah, I don't like the second preface as much either, but I think like it's kind of, because it's kind of like it's trying to make it seem a bit more true, even though he kind of does say, I know that like ghosts aren't real, but like some aspect of this must be real. Ooh.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't make it more scary. Like you say, it just kind of adds to the kind of the mythos that we all buy into, which is interesting that he does that in the preface, because thinking about fucking Derrida, but our least favourite, our worst enemy.
Yeah.
Derrida, who wrote about the structure of narrative and like talking about the preface as this kind of existing in this liminal space between something that kind of presents itself as should be allowed to stand on its own, but also can't stand on its own because it's so connected to the thing. And so it's an inherently Gothic thing in itself. And so when he kind of changes that and kind of goes like, oh no, it's all fake and I wrote it, and
it's the Scooby-Doo moment.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll talk about Scooby-Doo later, because this whole novel to me just reads as pure Scooby-Doo,
running in one door and coming out another.
It is, but this is the unveiling moment, where Horace Walpole takes off the Italian mask, and it's actually an English member of Parliament.
Yeah, and it's a bit sad.
Yeah,
it takes away from it a little bit. Fucking Horace. But yeah, so should we talk about the characters?
Let's talk about the characters.
Let's talk about the big, not the big cheese, but the main character, I guess, and also the villain,
smaller,
Manfred.
shittier cheese.
What do you think of Manfred?
I think Manfred is horrendous. I understand that he was inspired by Henry VIII, who I, as a historical figure, have a soft spot for, because I think he was horrendous too, but in a slightly more interesting way. No, I don't think Manfred isn't interesting. I just think I don't think he's got really any redeeming features about him whatsoever.
I do think that the part where he's trying to entertain the Silent Night is sweet. And I feel kind of bad for him.
I don't feel bad for him in that context, because I think he invites Frederick in. Keep changing how I'm pronouncing his name. He invites Frederick in. Freddy baby. He invites him in, and Frederick is like, I want this castle. Stop hosting a banquet in my castle. And Manfred's like, hey guys, let's just
You're not hosting me, I'm hosting you.
Yeah. This is a host up. He's like, let's just let's be entertained. Let's have like one good night before you and me have to fall out, because this is my fucking castle. Like, I do not feel any sort of sympathy for him. Obviously, the scene with him and Isabella, where Isabella was like, because Isabella thinks it's like a fake out. Isabella's like, I'm really sorry that your son's dead, and he's like, I genuinely don't care. And she's like, I am sorry. And he's like, I don't care.
I would like you say that. I would like to write an essay on the kind of how Manfred kind of takes on kind of a lot of female roles, which I think is kind of interesting, because he's the one, he's the one kind of hosting, and he's the one kind of like managing his children's like matrimonial futures. And there's another part where he like gets really, where they're having a banquet. This is in all the convoluted bit after, it's people are thinking they're going to marry people and whatever, towards the end of the book, where they have a banquet and everyone's really angry and upset because everyone's having to marry all these people they don't want to, and they're being dispossessed of their heritage or whatever, and Manfred just like can't handle it and gets really drunk and like tries to make everyone like have a good time. And it's just like, I mean, I know he's obviously the cause of all of everyone, but like it's just really sweet to kind of see him kind of take on this emotional labour in that way, when Hippolyta is nowhere to be seen in these scenes.
I mean, Hippolyta at this point has just been sort of like
I don't see why Hippolyta's there, to be honest.
I don't either, but like that's the case for a lot of like these female characters. Yeah. There's like Victoria, one nameless gal, two nameless gals, who's counting, because they're all, like you said, basically walking wombs. Like Hippolyta, who is there to just basically be like sad and pious and like be like,
she's really only there as because someone has to be in Manfred's way of immediately just marrying Isabella.
Exactly.
She's just there so that he can't do that
and to show like how decent she is as a mother, because she's like obviously torn up about Conrad's death, but to show that like Manfred is a horrible man that doesn't give a fuck, like, and all he cares about is having like a good healthy son. Yeah,
which Hippolyta just can't do.
Exactly. She just can't do it.
She just can't do it. And so the women in this are I feel like it's interesting how the kind of gender roles are sort of flipped in that way, where Hippolyta is kind of taking a very hands-off, she is the absent father. Yeah. Kind of not really, just resigned to her life, and sort of Manfred still just running around. I mean, he is terrible. There's something very, very funny about him trying to make everyone have a good time after he's ruined their lives.
I'm trying to find the specific scene where they are not having the fucking banquet whatsoever. He's so silent. You are right. Frederick, when he comes in, is like, the knight made no reply, but dismounting was conducted by Manfred to the great hall of the castle. They do not want to speak to Manfred. They want their castle.
And Manfred is just trying so hard.
They want
and
their
he's like, they
castle.
just say that there's banquet and they don't speak, and so he's like, oh, come to a private room. You'll feel more comfortable there.
Since mirth is not your mood, let us be sad. He says.
He's such a child.
He says. Like, they do not want to speak. I think they keep giving him his ring. Your friends and you shall enjoy the laws of hospitality. Rest here until refreshments are brought. I will but give orders for the accommodation of your train.
He's such a good hostess.
He put several questions to them, but was answered only by signs. They do not want to speak to him. They raised their visors just to eat, and that was it. They're like these guys in just full suits of armour, like at dinner, like with their like raising their visors just to sort of like put food in their face, and then like immediately shuttering it.
And Manfred's like, you want some more wine? How are your travels?
Listen, we've all been in and for the later one, I suppose I can sympathise with a situation, like, sometimes everyone's been in a slightly awkward situation where maybe the best reaction to it is not get abysmally drunk, but maybe you do so anyway.
That's the only way out, and I feel like
isn't he messed up when he knifes Isabella? I think he's drunk, isn't he? That's where he's drunk. He goes, Frederick's just seen the which I will talk about later, the hermit ghost, and he's so like shocked by it, he like runs out and like Manfred's like, hey, and he like, barges past him. And he's like, what is his problem? I'm so mad right now. Arr! And then he finds out that obviously Isabella. He thinks it's Isabella and Theodore, but it's actually Matilda, obviously. And then he goes in a drunken rage
and kills
his daughter.
Yeah, obviously there are a lot of themes with Manfred in terms of like very classical demise, which I think is interesting because kind of the theme in classical kind of literature is that like people aren't born evil, or people like aren't evil, they just like make a bad decision, or like they get a bit too big for their boots. It's all pun because everything's massive in this book. Is
there a physical description of Manfred?
I don't think
there really is, because I'm sat here and I'm like, I bet your image of him. Actually, no. Maybe our images are quite similar.
If you had to pick someone, who would you say most looks like? Because
to play Manfred,
in my mind, he's Rufus Sewell.
I'm not sure who I would cast as Manfred. I'm not sure who I would class as Manfred.
How do you pick, like, describe him? Describe him in your mind.
I think he's a little bit portly, sort of late middle-aged. I think he's got one of those like beards that sort of comes up like here. I don't know why.
Like the proper mutton chops?
Yeah,
like the Western mutton
I don't know why I said here, because this is audio based, so you don't know what I'm talking about. But one of those bit, and I have no idea if this is period specific, if this is true to the period. But I imagine him with those like one of those beards that's got like the mutton chops that basically turn into a moustache. One of them.
I think, yeah.
And he's bald on top, but he wears like a crown. When he takes his crown off, you can tell that he's bald.
That is a far cry from Rufus Sewell. But I see him as kind of like a kind of just kind of slightly dashing.
Oh, you think
kind
he's
of
handsome?
almost well, like kind of like DILF vibes, like kind of like
DILF vibes,
like just like a like older.
Isabella is clearly,
but like still kind of hot, in a way, still kind of has something going for him. Maybe he's going a little bit grey and like he's got a few crow's feet.
Okay,
but, like, he's still, sort of a
bit of a
warrior
catch.
Leader kind of
image. Okay.
Which is kind of then, because there's a whole kind of theme in this, which we probably will talk about more about later, of like the right to rule. And I think that Manfred, in my mind, kind of depicts someone who appears to have that right to rule because
visually
they look like the type of person who would be in charge, but are actually completely.
No, I think that's a valid point. I can see that. He will remain bald and
I do really
portly in my mind, but only because I don't think I can change.
That's
how I've cast him.
I think because I think there are like Walpole himself kind of draws a lot of allusions to like Hamlet specifically, but also in Hamlet that's a very there's a lot of close connections to kind of like. Like who are the kind of old Greek heroes? I don't know. Like there's sort of that vibe, that kind of heritage that's being drawn on with Manfred in a lot of ways. And so I do think it is interesting that you say that like you think that he has no redeemable qualities, because obviously a big part of that is the fact that in those like in that classical tradition there is no sort of kind of good or evil.
I think the book bears that judgment on him as well, though, and being like it's not that he can be the only way the only way that he can be redeemed is by living like a pious life, like in seclusion.
He definitely falls a long way in the space of
which is quite
2
interesting
days.
when you think about sort of like religion and men in this book. A lot of these men have fought in holy wars. Whereas
has
Manfred hasn't fought in a holy war.
That's interesting because obviously Frederick, who is supposed to also be kind of a
fought in a holy war.
Character, fought in a holy war.
Do you know why he fought in the holy war? Because his wife died giving birth to Isabella. He was so upset that he decided to go
and not tell anyone if he was still alive.
Exactly. Yeah. Fight in a holy war. I've done that as well too. I've had a fight with my boyfriend and gone and fought in a holy war. Crusaded.
Who hasn't?
Yeah. Who hasn't, listeners?
Who hasn't done a brief stint in Jerusalem just to not deal with their emotional issues? But Alfonso also fought in a holy war, and he's meant to be a kind of a noble character.
I suppose these do have roots as well in sort of like classical tropes, like that Achillean sort of, like Homeric violence, which you can definitely sort of
that kind
prescribe
of
to
thumos.
Yes.
And in Manfred's case, Eros. So that's our opinion on Manfred. Let's talk about his antithesis, Theodore.
Theo.
That's not a way of saying anything. His antithesis, Theodore. His polar opposite.
Yeah. Well, his antithesis. No, that's
the yin to his yang.
Exactly.
The chalk to his cheese.
Theo.
What do we think of Theodore?
I think that Theo is...
Yeah, me too.
I don't think he's as polarizing nor as really interesting as like Manfred is. He is just sort of like... He was more... You know what? He was more interesting to me when he was rude peasant boy.
I liked him as
not even rude, as like peasant boy who's Manfred's impetuous as a slightly thoughtless peasant boy that Manfred decided to like direct his rage on. I liked him better then. I liked him better when he was under the helmet.
I liked him better on the helmet too.
I think when he started becoming like basically a walking, talking plot device, he was less fun.
Yes, because I think in contrast to Manfred's kind of classical roots, he kind of has a very obviously Christian. Like he is just good. He's just meant to be a good person, and he does all the right things, and he's in all the right places at the right time. And he just what can you say about him?
He's hot. He's hot.
Do they ever say he's hot? They say he looks like Alfonso.
Yeah, and I think no. I think there is like an actual description. Again, sorry, gang, I haven't got it to hand, but there is an actual description of we'll be more prepared for our later episodes. But
when we finally get around to doing Twilight, I have so many notes.
You had it here first.
I have notes, I have page numbers, I have quotes.
Whipping them out. No, Theodore, I think he is supposed to be quite handsome. I think, like Alfonso. He's got to be. I mean, it's not his stunning personality.
Yeah,
that's
he never
Matilda.
says no one ever says Alfonso's really handsome, but he's like, it would be really funny if he's just like portrayed as like
he's ugly as sin. Yeah,
and like he just has to be good looking, doesn't he?
He has, yeah. He is definitely good looking,
and it's just a bit kind of. But his father, on the other hand, who I didn't put in our note section, but we should talk about Friar Jerome, because if Theodore is the kind of this Christian hero, what does that say about Friar Jerome, who is a friar who has this very sordid backstory with even if you believe that Theodore was born within wedlock, which is it's never disclosed, Father Jerome lost his son for like a good almost 18 years. I don't know how old Theodore's meant to be, but like he still lose him and kind of just goes just joins the church and sort of doesn't really.
He has a mental. Well, no, not like a mental. He's so overcome by another point. Would you remember? He's like, "Oh my God, Manfred, this is my son. Like, this is my son. I can't believe I found him. You wouldn't kill my son, would you?" Manfred's like, "I might kill your son. I might still kill your son. In fact, I will.
Unless you bring me something to fuck."
pretty irredeemable. But anyway, Friar Jerome, I think he's also he is the sort of, as a lot of religious figures tend to operate within Gothic literature, or not. That's a pretty big generalisation.
We are doing the monk.
We are doing the monk.
Time,
so that's pretty
we're
fresh in my
dispel those beliefs.
Pretty fresh in my mind. But as Friar Jerome, he does also exist as a sort of religious force to Hippolyta, being like, you cannot divorce Manfred. One, for the religious reasonings, and two, because he doesn't want these young maidens to go to these horrible old men.
Yeah, he does seem to be made into the sort of moral arbiter, which is weird when we remember that he'd lost his son.
Exactly.
Like, he might have had an illegitimate child with a woman who he then... I don't know, because Theodore's backstory is a bit hazy.
It is.
So essentially, like, he says, I was raised by my mother until I was 5. So she obviously has no help from Friar Jerome, Earl Jerome, whatever you want to call him. That's never explained why he never bothers to engage. He's lost him at this point, and we don't know why. So it does imply to an extent that Theodore is illegitimate. The mum then dies when he's 5. Theodore is taken by pirates, which is something that don't spend enough time on.
Horace wrote that one without thought pretty quickly.
Yeah, it really did, and I really want kind of Will Turner backstory.
Oh my god, Theodore is like Will Turner. Wow, you're so right.
He's just too perfect.
Yeah,
he's too perfect, and was raised by pirates. and then he just decides to come to Otranto and only arrives 6 days before.
Yeah, why is he there?
He does say he went on he goes looking. I think he goes looking for his father and comes to Otranto, but it's kind of like, okay, so, which is also why I want to hear about his backstory, is his pirate life, because he spends a good long while not looking for his father.
Yeah.
Pirating? I presume?
Theodore, did you do crimes?
Yeah, he must have done crimes.
Theodore did crimes.
It's all very kind of money, and I don't think Horace maybe thought about this when he was writing the implications of Friar Jerome and his son's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, Friar Jerome is this moral arbiter, and it felt weird to me reading that, thinking all of these things, like he must have abandoned his son and his pregnant girlfriend, wife, whoever, and is now kind of, maybe that's why he's so against divorce.
Maybe.
He's trying to atone for some past regret, but I think Father Jerome is a more interesting character than his son.
I agree.
His boring son.
Yeah.
His boring, perfect son.
Boring, perfect Will Turner son. That's what he's going to look like in my mind now.
Will Turner.
Yeah. Orlando Bloom.
I think that's a very good. Yeah.
That'll work.
I think that works very well in my mind as well. So yeah, that's Theodore and his father.
Now we've got the women.
The women. It's just
yeah.
It's interesting because I think that the women are actually probably the most realistically written.
I agree. I think
even if it is incredibly problematic the way that they're treated, I think that because obviously Horace Walpole's, as he says in his second preface, that his intention is to write, believable characters to react realistically, which, as we've seen in the case in Manfred, is not the case.
Yeah.
But the women have these moments of real, like, you can really relate to them. Like, there's a quote that I've highlighted. Oh no, I've lost it now. Wait a minute, I've highlighted it, so I will be able to.
She's more prepared than I.
I'm not. I highlighted one quote and then you showed up and I was like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's in blue. Hang on. It's oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so this comes, so this comes just as they arrive back at the castle, with wounded Frederick.
I'm getting you to do it now too.
So and it's talking about the women. So Matilda, Hippolyta, and Theodore's there as well. So it said Matilda blushed at seeing Theodore and Isabella together, but endeavoured to conceal it by embracing the latter and condoling with her on her father's mischance, which is like a very realistic thing to have. Like, instead of like she's like, oh my god, she's with my crush. Oh, what am I going to do? And then just goes up to Isabella and is just super, super nice to her.
Yeah.
And like,
that is very, very realistic as well. They are written with, I don't want to say more thought, but more realistically.
Yeah. Whether it be intentional or unintentional.
Exactly.
And there's also that part where they have that weird awkward conversation. They're just kind of like skirting around the subject of who fancies Theodore.
Yeah.
And then Isabella kind of says, well, I obviously don't like him because he killed my father, but also you can't like him either.
Exactly.
Yeah, they have these very realistic kind of moments, and then they're just kind of just killed or moved around.
They do have like we were speaking about earlier, that like when she's like, oh my god, she just presumes that Manfred's advance on her on Isabella is like him testing whether she really did love his son, and she's horrified when she slowly begins to realize that he intends to like assault her and impregnate her essentially. And she's pretty shocked about that.
Yeah, and they're kind of just sort of moved around basically for the men's character development, just so the men can do either heroic or...
Yeah, well, like Bianca...
oh, fucking Bianca.
God bless Bianca. Bianca letting Frederick know that she's just seen a massive hand, and Frederick's like, oh my god, you brought a massive hand into my castle? That's we are not... This double wedding is not going through. Now I know you have a massive hand in your castle. And Manfred's like, oh my god, Bianca.
You idiot.
Like, she's like... But the thing is, like, I like love how Bianca is just able to, like, fuck up as much as possible. She's, like... There's, like, a few instances where, like... I think Matilda's pretty rude to her. But, like... All Theodore had to do was, like, say some, like, vaguely wrong comments a few times. And he nearly loses his head, like, several times throughout the novel. I don't know why I said novel twice.
The novel.
But Bianca can just, like, chat shit, and that's fine. What the hell happens to Bianca after Matilda dies?
I don't think it's ever mentioned. It's like the same way that the last we see of Friedrich is he locks himself in his room, having seen the hermit ghost, and then we just never...
Oh yeah, we never
hear
hear
about him again. Yeah. Again, a lot of plot points just not picked up.
No.
And this might be a good point to move on to talking about the ghosts and what is the fucking point?
What's your favourite?
My favourite ghost. You know, I can't stress enough how much I love the massive foot.
I do love the massive foot. I also love the random, you know, like when the painting falls down and then the ghost steps out of the painting and walks down the hallway, and like this is the first ghost.
And Manfred just follows.
Yeah, and then it walks to a door, I think, and then like he can't get in the door.
Yeah,
and then it's never mentioned again.
Yeah, the massive foot never comes back, and it's kind of just like.
But like, what are all the significance of all these different ghosts? Like, sure, we've got, the massive foot, the massive hand, and it's relevant in terms of the prophecy, which we did have written down, I think.
We have written it down. Is that
we're gonna? Should we save the prophecy to sort of touch on later, or should we just tell it now?
Let's save it. Let's save it. Well, maybe it'll come up again. Who knows? We will talk about it. We'll definitely talk about it. But I think, yeah, it's kind of, they're not really, they don't do anything really. Mm-hmm. One of them gives a prophecy. One of them is a bit kind of spooky. Mm-hmm. And but then mainly it's just massive body parts and sort of like. Have you ever seen Crimson Peak?
I have not.
Okay, it's this. Do you know what it is? It's
I do not.
It's this film that came out maybe like. I don't know. I want to say like maybe 2014 or 10 years ago. It's roughly that time frame. It's by Guillermo del Toro. So it's very like aesthetically gothic, and it's about a girl who lives in New York, and I think it's set in like the 1880s or 1890s, who wants to be a writer, and she meets this very dashing kind of stranger who is from this house, I can't remember what the house is called, who owns this estate, and you know he has this creepy sister, and they fall in love, and she goes back to him to this creepy old house, and this is Crimson Peak because it's a mining thing or something. The soil is red because they're mining for something and it's not going well, and so there's a lot of financial anxiety.
Okay.
But the house is obviously haunted. but there's no real reason for the ghosts. They kind of just they appear and they're scary, and it's kind of like scary moments of cinema to watch. And then, you know, you get to kind of the mystery, which is essentially I can't remember. There's incest, which we will also talk about in relevance to this story. And you know, there's, you know, he's sleeping with his creepy sister, but he really is in love with her and he wants to marry her, and maybe they're trying to sacrifice her or something. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, like, there's all of these ghosts that go on, and like the story itself, you know, with this conspiracy of like she's been brought here for this kind of, you know, purpose, which is essentially to be sacrificed or something that will help their mining endeavours, and, you know, the sister and the brother are sleeping together, and it's all alone in this like creepy old house in the middle of nowhere, and it's really difficult to get to, and like that is scary enough without the addition of all these random ghosts which appear and then just never, like, they're never explained. We don't know why they're there. And they just seem to really be there as kind of like a kind of sort of harbinger of doom,
Right.
which I guess you could say that is the function of the ghosts in the Castle of Otranto, but they're just not scary. Like, a massive foot and a massive hand
No.
isn't scary.
No.
Like, so it's kind of, you know, I don't know why. It's difficult to know why they're there, and the way that people interact with the ghosts as well is also kind of scary. People obviously find the foot scary. You know, they're saying that all the servants will leave because they've seen this massive foot. But, you know, Manfred just, like, sees this ghost and then follows it and is kind of like, well, that was that, and then it's never brought up again.
Nope. Never mentioned again.
And it's kind of just...
Normal-sized human ghost, which is probably scarier than a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So...
I think a Bigfoot would be quite fun.
I think a Bigfoot would be good.
I think it would be a good time.
I would investigate it.
That's a good time ghost.
That's a good time ghost.
Yeah, I don't think that's scary. And so, yeah, you kind of wonder what is really why? Because, you know, Manfred being this incredible tyrant who is trying to, you know, divorce his wife and marry this young girl and kind of breed with her and, you know, rent this prophecy is kind of horrific enough.
Need some spooky ghosts. There's like there's a part where blood drips off the statue of Alfonso's nose.
That's when
spooky.
that's when they go to kill Theodore, isn't it? And they're by the statue and it starts like crying blood.
Yeah.
It's like,
very, very spooky.
That would be scary.
That would be scary. That would scare me.
But the way they kind of deal with it is Father Drome is just sort of like, look, this is a sign, and then Manfred's like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of, no one's sat there like the statue is crying blood.
Never as like I suppose when Horace was like, some of my characters react like realistically. And like we said, we just made a point of saying that the hand and the foot isn't scary, but I probably would be slightly. I would not just have a sort of impassive reaction to it like Manfred kind of does, but also Manfred is mostly just interested in, like, you know, sorting his family out, sorting all these affairs out, keeping Otranto. But his servants are just absolutely beside themselves several times. They're like, I'm quitting. I can't stand the sight of these massive limbs.
These massive appendages.
Yeah, I can't do this. Like, what's next? What's next?
Which I think is fair.
I think it's fair as well.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that Manfred kind of ignoring the ghost is kind of almost as weird as people being scared of a giant foot.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, and why is everything massive? That's the second point.
Why is everything massive?
To bring up, because again, it's not scary because it's not just like a helmet fell and killed him, or like, you know, they saw a ghostly shoe or something. It's like, these things are massive.
Yeah.
Like,
obviously, it's linked to the old prophecy.
Which we probably should.
We'll just do the prophecy.
Are you going to do the prophecy?
I'll do the prophecy.
Okay.
It's that the castle and lordship of Otranto should pass from the present family whenever the real owner should be grown too large to inhabit it.
I like that prophecy. I think it's...
I think it's nonsensical, but straight to the point, and that's amazing.
But I think it is. It creates this perfect like this perfect climate for comedy, because obviously you're meant to kind of question, like, oh, you think Manfred is the rightful heir, and he's obviously kind of got this massive ego that kind of drives him to do all this stuff. So in that way, he has kind of grown too large to inhabit it. Mm-hmm. But then obviously the real heir is obviously meant to be Alfonso, and his ghost is really massive.
Yeah,
and so the ghost of Alfonso has grown too large to inhabit it, and so the line is obviously has to pass. But it's just like taking literally the idea of something growing too large by literally just making these into sort of like big. It's kind of the equivalent of clown shoes. Like, they're just comically sized things.
It is. I've not thought about it like that. That is. But also, the real owner, he's grown too large to sort of inhabit it, but his bloodline does return to Otranto with Theodore. So
Theodore's... Oh, yeah.
So what does it mean?
What does it mean?
So what does it mean?
Maybe... yeah, because he obviously would also be classed as the real owner. So, it's all... Horace... Horace why?
I have no idea what...
But everything is massive, and it's comical. And so, you know...
And things that shouldn't be massive are, like the helmet. Like, I think we've said previous that everyone keeps mentioning that the helmet is massive. How did the helmet get this big?
How did the helmet get this big? How did the helmet end up on top of Conrad? How did the massive shoe, like, where are these things coming from?
Moving swiftly on, and that's how
it's just, don't think about it too much, it's just there. I really like
everyone poses the question. Yeah. So, like, the question's always, well, not always, the question's usually posed, wow, this helmet's so big, how did it get here? And then never answered.
And they never try and even find out.
Never spare another thought for it.
And there's no, what I guess is interesting about it is there's no lore, there's no like kind of ghost lore behind it to explain why, you know, there's never that moment where they're kind of going through, this is how ghosts work in this universe, this is why they're appearing in this way, you know, this is what they want or anything like that. You know, I am currently rewatching the entire series of The Vampire Diaries. And let me tell you, there is a whole lot of lore in that.
Yeah. That'll be a fun episode.
So much. We will do the Vampire Diaries series when I don't can we read, how many books are there? There's too many.
We can't do the books, we have to do the series.
Maybe we'll just do one book. No, well, we'll do the series first.
Also, just to let you know that this book is less than 100 pages long. By about 10 pages in, you've completely forgotten that Conrad got flattened by a giant helmet. You've completely forgotten that this has happened.
Poor Conrad!
Completely forgotten. And it seems all the characters have as well.
We almost left him off our family tree.
We did.
Because he's just so irrelevant.
He's very irrelevant
to the story, which is just the saddest
He doesn't even get to ever speak for himself, though. A lot of characters do. But it's just like, wow, he was weak and shit, wasn't he? Imagine marrying him. And Isabella's like, oh my god.
It's just, maybe there should have been a Conrad ghost. Maybe that would have been...
That would have been good. That would have been way better. I mean, that's Horace.
Massive foot.
Yeah.
Instead, we just don't hear from him again. And there's just so many of these... In terms of, like, the aesthetics of Gothic, it's obviously... I mean... Well, I guess one thing that I always think is, like, I don't associate Gothic aesthetic with medieval things. Or at least I didn't until I kind of, like, read this book.
I think I definitely did. I had the old, you know, castles and sort of hybridity and stuff. I think, for me... I don't really, and I know it's a big part of it with sort of like the swooning maiden or the blushing maiden, and I do associate the Gothic with sort of bad things happening to women, which bad things definitely do happen to women in the Castle of Otranto.
Yeah.
But I think like suits of armour and there was because no one seems to want to get out of their suit of armor.
He just loved their suits of armor.
I did.
Jamie did tell me the other day that it was becoming a problematic for his mental health that he hadn't yet worn a suit of armor.
It's because I'm reading things like this and I'm like, damn, these people are having so much fun in their suits of armor. God. Like, I was reading about Frederick being morose at dinner in a suit of armor, and I think if I was at a banquet and I was wearing a suit of armor, I would act however the hell I wanted.
It's very dramatic.
You don't need a personality if you've got a suit of armor on, and Theodore and Frederick prove that.
Is that why all men in history were arseholes? Because I've got my suit of armor, I don't care. But yeah, I think in terms of, like, it's very aesthetically dramatic. And I guess that's what's interesting, because I think, before I kind of read kind of the original Gothic books, because the ones I was kind of familiar with were sort of like Dracula, and then kind of like, the Bronte sisters, and, then kind of more modern Gothic books, and sort of the concept of, like, Victorian, like, Victoriana kind of aesthetic as being inherently Gothic.
Yeah.
And so I was interested, I mean, obviously, this was well before the Victorian times, but I was interested that it was medieval, and that is like such a, but it's a very dramatic look, and I think it does lend itself to kind of,
I think
that
Wuthering
sort of
Heights
othering of the narrative and of the characters. You can kind of separate yourself from them because of the supposed distance in time.
Yeah.
Wuthering Heights, what were you saying?
I just think Wuthering Heights should have had more massiveness and suits of armor. I think any Victorian Gothic novel could have been improved by spooky happenings that border on comedy, if not are comedic. And
I mean, we will do Dracula soon, and there are a lot. You haven't read Dracula, have you?
I have not. I've watched Nosferatu many times, but never read Dracula.
There are a lot of ridiculous happenings. There is one point where Dracula crawls down the side of a castle like a lizard.
Yes! Yes!
It's so good. And yeah, I guess that would kind of, in terms of the theory, in terms of a literary theory, that does put it squarely within kind of Anne Radcliffe's definition of male horror as opposed to, like, female terror, because it is kind of slightly, not grotesque, well, I mean, it is slightly grotesque, but, like, garish.
Garish,
like,
definitely.
kind of garish, and kind of, yeah, it definitely has that kind of aestheticism to it.
I described it in a similar way, but without such highbrow language, as a Scooby-Doo-ish, because like we've mentioned, there is a lot of chasing around the castle, random spooky ghosts, just for the sort of sake of having a fright, and for Manfred to go, what the hell is going on? Wait, Isabella! What the hell? What are you talking about? There's a giant foot. I need to find Isabella. Everyone stop telling me all these, like, creepy things that are happening, and let me find Isabella.
Yeah, and we will talk more about.
And there's, like, so much drama, like, things go from 100 to 1.
The drama of the characters, and also the drama of, like, the narrative, which isn't purely driven by the characters.
Yeah.
Like, there are natural interventions. We will talk more about that in a minute, because it's something I'm really interested in. But before we do, I have put under our aesthetic band incest as a Gothic convention, which does happen. It's just a part of it, because it's just
this
a
one's
Gothic
all
ideal.
This one is all Charlie's point as well.
Well, no, because I think it's interesting, because I was kind of thinking about it, and when I was reading any of the literature that we were reading about it, or, like, discussing it, like, people were constantly referring to, like, the incest. Everyone is talking about the incest, and I'm like, kind of, what incest?
Where is the incest?
Where is the incest? And we were kind of, like, sort of looking at the family tree. There's obviously a lot of very convoluted interminglings,
right?
But also the way that Isabella specifically is kind of meant to be marrying Conrad, and so in that way, obviously they didn't get married, but they kind of have this sort of understanding that is their relationship.
Yeah.
And Isabella has been living in this family unit for a while.
And she and Matilda are like sisters.
Yeah, they say over and over again that they're like sisters and we're like family and blah 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 blah. And then Manfred, you know, as
I'm about to
the
do
father
something
figure,
so heinous.
Yeah, as the father figure in that dynamic, whether it's by blood or not, you know, her father's presumed dead at this point. You know, they think he died in the Holy Lands, and so he's kind of all she has.
Yeah,
and just wants to have sex with her.
Yeah.
And it's all
violently wed her.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it's like, it is a convention in Gothic literature.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting here because it's not immediately noticed, like, it's not immediately kind of understood, like, how problematic it is.
Manfred is like, I'm literally trying to assault her, like, this is already pretty problematic. And then it's like, and he is kind of like your daughter figure as well.
Yeah. So, how far do you think that, you know, when Manfred says, I only want to marry you because I need an heir, how true do you think that is? Or do you think that is, to some extent, him just being like, I just want to have sex with this young, beautiful lady?
I think it is solely to do, because thinking about it, if he were motivated by that, surely he would have sort of like come on to her earlier whilst Conrad was alive, because the thing that kicks this off is the fact that Conrad is dead and he's like, fuck, shit, I need an heir so badly, I need an heir. And he has like, you know, he has like a mental breakdown about the fact that he needs an heir, like now. Does it have to be with Isabella? I think she's the most readily available and girl that he can access, and it makes sense for him to.
But when she runs away, I mean, she causes a lot of problems for him by running away, by continually kind of making it a problem. Like, could he have just gotten some poor peasant, nameless woman from the village?
He could probably, but like, she doesn't have a name. Like, you know, she wouldn't be part of any sort of. I think he could probably have done that, but I don't think it would make much sense.
It seems
for him
like
to
there's
do
an
that.
extent to which it kind of feels like it has to be Isabella.
I think it does have to be Isabella.
No. I think it does for Manfred, but I don't see why for anyone else it has to be.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean, like, you know, if she ran away and he couldn't, you know, she runs away like a lot and she's difficult to find, and it's kind of like, couldn't you have just, you know, written to one of your rich count friends and been like, you got a daughter, I'm buying.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose at that point, no, I think you are right. Incest.
Yeah, and it kind of seems like it's not just incest for
incest sake.
Needs. Well, no, for the need of like an heir. It seems like it has to be Isabella because he does find specifically her to be attractive.
Yeah, I agree. He does say a shitload like, my son sucked, but me, I'm pretty.
Yeah,
he says great.
Like, oh, he wasn't worthy of your.
Yeah, no. He does, doesn't he? He does. Yeah, incest.
It's fucking freaky. Yeah, so with all that in mind, with all that Gothic asceticism in mind, is it scary?
No. I wouldn't say I was particularly scared, but I was entertained. Again, it was as one of the reviewers from the beginning said, soapboxy. Like, it definitely is like a bit of a drama with some like, with, you know, I almost said Gothic stylings, but obviously because it's foundational to the genre, you know, like it kind of generated those stylings. So do I find it scary? No. I think the idea of being chased round a castle by, with the incestuous element, especially being chased around a castle with a man who you believe to be your father, who now wants to wed you and have sex with you until you produce a male heir, is terrifying. All the ghosts are kind of like, I don't know, like Hocus Pocus Hall, like haunted house kind of like, whoa, they pop out at you and give you a sort of a spooky scare. But I don't think it's scary. Do you think it's scary?
I don't know. I think the concept behind the narrative is frightening. You know, just with the concept of like a kind of tyrannical despot who it will chase you down and try to force you into marriage with him so that he can produce an heir, so that he can stop this prophecy from happening is frightening. I don't think it's a frightening read.
No, I agree, it's not a frightening read.
No, but the Hermit is.
We've got a little.
Because he's probably the scariest ghost when he kind of, and also the most kind of Scooby-Doo. Like
he is very Scooby-Doo. We've got a point here that says Jamie's Hermit bit because I love the Hermit bit.
I want you to tell
much.
me what you think about the Hermit.
So the Hermit bit. Obviously the Hermit. I think the biggest scare. You know, if this were a movie, which I'm sure it is, but if this were like a remade as a soulless copy in 2022. This would be the trailer scare. This would be the scare with the most money in it. But it follows after. Actually, it follows one of the big limb scares, where Bianca says to Manfred, "Oh my God! Like that we've just seen the hand," and then Frederick overhears, and then Manfred's like, "Stop! Like Frederick's gonna hear." He is here, and he can hear. And then Frederick is like, "Oh, like you keep your daughter and think no more of Isabella," because he thinks that heaven itself has declared has declared Manfred no longer fit for the Principality of Otranto. But he doesn't think that for very long. Basically, in the next couple of sentences, he's like, "I don't really think that because Matilda's kind of fine."
He just wants to have
So
Matilda.
yeah, Matilda's kind of great. So maybe I'll let him think that. Until we've had our banquet. Another banquet follows where he's like he decides to retire to bed. He tells everyone he's going to go to bed because he's lost a lot of blood at this point. There's the passage of time is kind of wishy-washy. Like who knows how long it's been since he was literally nearly butchered. But now he's drinking. He's Frederick.
He's suddenly miraculously better, and it's like the next day.
On pretense of his late loss of blood, he decides to go to bed, but he's like, "I'm gonna go to Hippolyta's apartment and ask her whether she really intends to divorce Manfred, because if she does, that's great, and that means that I'm not getting played, and I really get to marry Matilda." So he goes up there. And he pushes open the door, and there's a figure stood at the mirror, and he's like, he thinks it's a religious figure, so he's like, "Reverend Father, I sought Hippolyta," and then the figure's like, "Hippolyta, camest thou to this castle to seek Hippolyta?" And then the figure, turning slowly round, discovered to Frederick the fleshless jaws and empty sockets of a skeleton wrapped in a hermit's cowl. And obviously, Frederick freaks out. But I think it's the best scare there. A skeleton, a spooky skeleton.
Yeah, it's a skeleton, but he knows it's the Hermit.
He knows it's the Hermit.
Him this massive sword.
Exactly, completely, fleshless. But he's wearing the hermit's cowl, and the skeleton says to him, "But say, blessed spirit, what is thy errand to me? What remains to be done?" And the skeleton's like, "To forget Matilda." And he finishes. So the hermit said to get him right in the head. He's like, "What are you doing?
Dick in your pants.
You need to fucking stay here and get this castle
and not have sex
and
with
not
Matilda.
Shag Matilda."
I think it's interesting now that actually you've brought that up, because I'm trying to think, like, it feels like a ghost appears, almost, perhaps with the exception of the bleeding eye statue bit, when some man is trying to have sex with a woman he shouldn't be having sex with.
It's true. Oh my God, it's true. This scene is 7 pages from the end of the book, by the way. I've just worked it out. 7 pages from the end of the book.
7 pages from... Which version is this?
This is
The
Oxford World's Classics.
If you would like to indulge. We haven't completely put you off. But yeah, maybe that's the point of the ghost. Maybe it's all to do with sex. I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that as a concept.
I love that as well.
Maybe I'll write an essay on that. I am obsessed. I'm obsessed with the concept. The ghosts are only there as
cock blocking. Yeah, cock blocking ghosts.
Cock blocking the men from stopping.
If you see that on JSTOR, you know who it's by.
Yeah, and the difference between, I guess, Manfred and Friedrich is that Friedrich listens to the ghosts. And he goes and locks himself in his room, and we never hear from him again.
Yeah,
and obviously Matilda dies.
Oh
so
no,
we unable to.
We hear from him again right at the end, in which he offers Isabella to Theodore, but Theodore's like, "No, I'm too upset right now to marry."
Give me a day, my heart will heal like your death wound that I gave.
Oh no, they both are so upset that they basically enter like a marriage of they're both so upset they enter a marriage of misery, but not miserable with each other. They're just miserable in general because Matilda was everything to them, and Theodore, and then they own Otranto in misery. Everyone's upset.
It's kind
nobody
of
wins. Nobody wins.
It's a very nobody wins, and yet they kind of. I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess Isabella did have the hots for him.
Yeah, but Isabella didn't want her best friend to die. Isabella's Isabella's kind of...
Okay, I did forget that she may have felt that. Because she never speaks of it. We never hear her reaction.
No. Theodore's grief was too fresh to admit the thought of another. And then they have discourses with of his dear Matilda that he was persuaded he could know no happiness but in the society of one with whom he could forever indulge the melancholy that had taken possession of his soul. That is the end of the novel. That's what it ends on.
That's really dark for what is comparatively.
They're like trauma bonded. Yeah, they're like trauma bonded by the end of it.
Yeah, and they just decide to wallow in that for a time. It's like almost like the saddest clown honk in the world. The romantic poets kind of just be like, I'll never get over this. And yeah, so it's a sort of a sad ending for something that's so quite funny and quite silly and ridiculous. There are a lot of funny aspects to this book. We've obviously talked about the massive things. The mistaken identities, though, it's interesting because obviously, as we've mentioned, Horace does compare it in his second preface to his attempt at writing Hamlet, which is obviously a tragedy, and kind of, following in the footsteps of Shakespeare. And there are a lot of Shakespearean qualities. None of them are really that horrific, though. The mistaken identities and kind of confused identities and the interchangeability of certain people has an element of comedy to it. In terms of like aesthetics, like how when Manfred comes into Frederick's stab bed, and sees what's his name, Theodore, all in Alfonso's old uniform, and kind of thinks that it is the ghost of Alfonso, and it's kind of, and everyone's like, no, it's Theodore. But also it comes at a very convenient point because he's seen Theodore's face before, and so it's kind of like you should. Okay,
Theodore, you know what? Maybe we've been kind of too mean to Theodore, because I'm flicking through the book right now, and Theodore's been through a lot.
Theodore does go through a lot.
He has been through a lot.
Yeah, and he
gets accused of being a magician. And he nearly gets...
I would love to be accused of being a magician.
He gets accused of being a magician, having stole the helmet from Alfonso's tomb, and then hit Conrad with it. For what reason? Nobody ever tries to establish a motive why Theodore would want to do that.
Be a magician.
Magic.
He's a secret magician. She's got stacks of playing cards in his back room. He's like, woohoo.
Throw them out.
I got compared to, I was wearing my pyjama set, not pyjama set, that one up there. For the listeners, it's a black pyjama set that's not a pyjama set, and it's got like feathers on it. And
it's very bougie.
It is very bougie. And I wore it out to my work Christmas party last night, and my boss compared me to a goth Santa, which I loved. And
I also love that, and I can see it. He knows when you're asleep. She knows when you're... I can't remember the Christmas rhyme. He sees you when you're sleeping.
He knows when you're awake. That's quite
Gothic Santa.
Yeah. Maybe Santa's really metal. We never realised.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were you saying before I said that? Oh yeah, he's accused of being a magician. Yeah, he does go through a lot. He does go through a lot. But there's a lot of like...
The dialogue is quite funny in
It's
this
all
as well.
kind of... The dialogue is really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, the women are interchangeable also. He kind of stabs his daughter thinking she's Isabella.
Yeah.
And they are just kind of interchangeable. And then, Isabella ends up marrying Theodore when Matilda was going to sort of end up with him, and it's kind of like, wah!
Yeah.
It's kind of like the end of what's it called? Midsummer Night's Dream, when they kind of are just like, ah!
Yeah.
Just sort of, they all end up with someone and it's fine, even if Theodore is sad.
I'm at the, speaking of comedy, I've just found the bit where Diego and Jacques tells Manfred about it, and they're like, have you seen a ghost? He's like, I wish I'd seen a ghost. Like, oh my god, I wish I'd seen a ghost. But they're like, it's the worst thing ever. It's the scariest thing ever. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And Manfred's like, what is it? And they're like, it's absolutely terrible. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And Manfred's like, what is it? And they're like, not telling him because they're just like so worked up about.
And then it's like, it's a massive foot.
And Manfred's like, what? A foot?
As are we, the audience, like, what? Really?
Satan himself, I believe, is in the great chamber next to the gallery.
Yeah,
Manfred's like,
Satan himself is a massive foot.
Yeah, like, holy shit, what are you talking about? Like, it, honestly, like, I mean, no, said Diego, and his hair stood on end. It is a giant, I believe. He's all clad in armour, for I saw his foot and part of his leg. And Manfred's just like, I do not have time for this. I do not have time for this.
It's just this weird moment of levity. This very tense moment, because this comes right as they're like chasing Isabel down the passage, and she's just escaped, and then they like burst in, like just as she's basically like gone through the door, and it's all very theatrical, and then they're like, no, we've seen a ghost, and then it's like, oh my god, it's never ending.
Yeah.
The horror, and then it's like a massive foot. You're like, okay,
Well,
we can relax now.
Satan, I guess, is just his foot. It's the least scary part of him, probably.
Do you think he'd wear? He has hooves, so
Yeah.
I would like to tell the Satanic Church that they shouldn't be worshipping a ghost.
Yeah.
worshipping a
You've
massive
got it
foot.
wrong, gang.
Turns out he's fooled you all along.
So I'm on the ending again, because I do think the ending does have comedic value. It ends so quickly. It just like it's just like Horace like. I don't know. The whole book is but it ends
bored.
so quickly. It just seems to get
He's
bored.
like, and they get married and it's fine.
Yeah, he's like, and they get the disconsolate company retired to the remaining part of the castle. Manfred abdicates the principality, and they both take on the habit of religion. Frederick gives Isabella to Theodore. What happens to Bianca? We don't know. What happens to the servants? I think they ran away because of the scary foot. What happens?
The castle is in ruins at the end.
The castle
is
in ruins because
what do they actually own?
What did they get out of this? Someone's clear up this fucking helmet. It's been here for so long.
Yeah, the helmet's just randomly there at the end, and it's we don't know how it gets. I mean, we don't know how it gets there in the first place.
Yeah.
But we don't know how it gets there at the end, and it's just like,
So what do they do?
This dead body, and it's just like the feathers just rustling. And it's like. It's just like a massive helmet.
And the big sword is just, I don't know, I think it's buried at this point, or like just on the lawn.
Just got it mixed up with one of the other giants.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is. I think I've had a funnier experience reading it.
I think I've definitely had a funnier experience. I found it more effective as a comedy with spooky elements than something that genuinely frightened me.
Yeah, and I do think that's that. I think that personally. Well, I'm not saying this as a blanket statement, but for me, I prefer funny, gratuitous kind of gothic. Sorry, Anne Radcliffe, than kind of like the sort of very thoughtful, philosophical, Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And the mysteries of the Udolphos. And
I like Frankenstein. I'm looking forward. I did enjoy this a lot. Like, I think it's very different, obviously, from Frankenstein. I'm going to enjoy The Monk, I think, which I think already has a bit of humour in just
so
like the
funny.
first bit. Like,
we will be doing that. That will be our next episode. And I can't wait to talk about that because I'm halfway through and it's
wild.
Fucking
Again.
wild. It's so insane. If we thought we had a problem explaining this plot.
Oh god.
Oh my god.
The Monk.
But that's the next bit. Before, the last point that I wanted to talk about is the representations of time, prophecy, and fate in the novel. And I thought this was the most interesting, gothic, and also ridiculous thing about reading this book.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like there's obviously this prophecy that it's gonna, leave Manfred's family blind, that he's really scared of, and but it's not just like, the ghosts seem to have nothing to do with it other than being some kind of a harbinger.
Yeah.
But nature really plays a role in it. Like, there's the bit where kind of Isabella kind of she's escaping from Manfred through the passageways, and she happens upon Theodore, which is again another coincidence. There are so many coincidences. Like, they just, everything, time, space, the space of the castle seems to be kind of working to kind of bring Manfred down.
I think Theodore, you mentioning that, Theodore himself exists as a sort of prophecy and a fate. Obviously, he's the almost return of Alfonso, but he is really surrounded by sort of like ghostly imagery, like I said earlier, with him sort of like being in the bottom of the what is it, just like the basement, or like the
they keep calling it the subterraneous passageways.
The subterraneous passageways,
and they keep saying it over and over again. They don't just say the passageways. Yeah. They always refer to them as the subterraneous passageways.
But there is a real sort of like ghostliness that exists around Theodore, in him opening the door and sort of like being in the shadows, in the fact that he is like he appears to Manfred, especially in the armour, as like, Alfonso back from the dead. Yeah. So
the kind of manifestation of his doom.
The physical manifestation of his like fate, of the prophecy here in the flesh, to drive him out of his home.
Yeah, and Theodore is one of those ones who, keeps having all these coincidences. Like, he just shows up at the right time. Like, he's, he goes,
finds his dad.
He escapes into the woods and he happens upon Isabella, and then kind of is the one to fight the knight who also happens upon them, and then it just is always has these kind of convenient kind of paths crossing. And which I think is pretty
gothic as well.
It's very gothic. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really like, is that there's this kind of, everything is
interconnected. Almost incestuously so.
Working against Manfred. And there's this the bit where, Isabella's in the passage. She finds Theodore, he agrees to help her, and then she's like, I know there's a lock here to this trap door or whatever. I can't find it. And then as she says it, this ray of moonlight, suddenly moves beyond the clouds and kind of lights up the lock, like falls directly onto the lock that she needs to find. And it's kind of like everything, everything is kind of working. Nature, time, all of it.
To aid her.
In
this prophecy to be realised.
Yeah, and it's very active. It's not just like passively happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost
and Manfred
like
is fighting against that.
Yeah.
As hard as he can.
As hard as he fucking can. Yeah. The concept of the repetition of time as well, the idea that the sins of the father will be revisited upon the son is I was about to say is a very kind of big thing. There are moments where it's kind of not.
Yeah, I mean,
Father Jerome for one.
Exactly. Yeah,
Theodore gets away with a Father Jerome gets away with a lot. And I was thinking, actually, when you were talking earlier,
does.
Father Jerome, I feel like, because there's another parallel to be drawn between two characters, and that's Father Jerome and Manfred, because Father Jerome is this kind of monk that has kind of fallen from grace from his earldom, and had to give that up for the sin that we're never told about, but we assume must have happened to some capacity.
Yeah, we aren't told about it. You have to just speculate.
And then Manfred ends up kind of in the same position where he sort of has to go into this life of pure Christianity.
He does.
And
or whatever his transgression was.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this kind of parallel of like these holy people who have sinned in the past, and
everyone who's left alive at the end is either taking the habit, miserable, or Frederick.
We hear nothing about how he feels. Yeah, it's just it's a very.
What about the sins of the father on the daughter? Has Frederick sinned?
Well, I guess in that way that's kind of the incest part, because
okay,
really,
that's a good reading.
Battered by their fathers and kind of passed around and sort of.
There's no they don't need prophecy. Like the father is literally. Violent.
Exactly. Yeah, it's nature's not doing anything there. It's all the dad.
All dad. It is all the dad.
Yeah. It's a book rich with Gothic convention, which it invented, and then subsequently subverts the convention that it established.
It does. It really does.
within the 100 pages.
It really does. So I guess the book in itself is what is the father, of the Gothic genre. And its sins, I suppose, are worked through by all the books to follow.
Which we will be reading. You know, when I was thinking, when we originally agreed to do this podcast, which is, by the way, so long ago, we agreed to do this podcast in July, and it's taken us this long. It's now February, and we've only finally.
It was about 70% my fault and 30% Charlie's as well. Charlie did also have her fair share of postponing it.
We did.
Mostly me, though.
It was mostly you.
We're finally
here. We're finally doing it. But we were originally going to do, the reason that I wanted to do this podcast was just so that I could talk about Twilight.
We still are going to do Twilight.
And we will talk about Twilight. I'm very excited to do
I am also. I rewatched, I think we should do the books and the movies because
we're doing it all
I rewatched Breaking Dawn yesterday and it was just fucking crazy.
It's so bonkers. We won't. We'll talk. Well, we will do a podcast. We will do an episode or maybe 2 episodes on it because there's just so much I have to say. But we were originally going to do that as the big opener, and then Jamie didn't read the books in time, although. So we didn't do that.
I didn't.
Then we were going to do Frankenstein, and we didn't do that one. And then I was kind of like, well, we have to read The Castle of Otranto because we're both taking European Gothic in uni this term. So we might as well start there since we've both read it. We have no excuse. And I was like, fine. All of my plans scuppered.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually a very fitting first episode.
I think it's a good first episode. We're putting out feelers. We're getting to grips with how we're going to discuss this and how we're going to go on from here.
And also, it's the original Gothic.
Oh, your point
novel.
is way better. Yeah.
So it's so it's kind of like everything that follows every book that we will probably read will have been inspired by this in some way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful. We're still on track.
Exactly. It makes sense. It's all worked out, and it won't take us another 8 months to do the next episode. It will probably come out in the next few weeks because we have to read the monk by then.
Yep.
So I guess that's where we should end it. Subscribe. Is that what people do? Like and subscribe.
Prescribe
Leave
yourself
to our podcast. So that, if you want to hear more from us and you want to hear about what we think of the monk, subscribe so that you don't have to worry about checking back. It will just tell you. And you can hear our voices in your ears once again. Like I said, we are doing the monk. I will make some kind of email and leave it in the comments below if you want to read it along with us and leave us your thoughts.
Which I'm sure will be 10 times more together, and
we're gonna have a better plan next time.
Oh yeah,
we're gonna have a
we definitely will.
have a better plan in place for the monk. And if you wanna send us your thoughts on it,
do so.
We would be because this is a book club, so join in. And on that note, we will see you. We'll sign off. Yeah, you will hear us in your ears very soon. In the meantime, farewell. Goodbye. Bye.